Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Earlier today, Prime Minister Modi completed a historic visit to two Southeast Asian countries. He carried out a 3-day visit to Brunei and Singapore, and this visit has given a major boost to India's Act East policy and added momentum to India's Indo-Pacific vision. So in this session, let's quickly analyze the importance of Prime Minister Modi's visit to these two Southeast Asian countries. See, both Brunei and Singapore, they are part of Southeast Asia region, which is strategically vital from India's perspective. If you look at the map over here, you can notice that Southeast Asia lies at the very heart of the Indo-Pacific. And today, in current global geopolitics and in the current global economy, Indo-Pacific region has been the focal point of the global economy and global geopolitics. And right at the center of the Indo-Pacific, we have Southeast Asia that links the Indian Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. So these two countries occupy strategic locations, and as you can see in the map, Singapore and as well as Brunei, they both occupy a very vital location in and around the South China Sea. Singapore is a city-state, a major financial hub, and as well as a big source of investments into India. It sits right across the Malacca Strait, which is a choke point, and a vital shipping lane that connects Indian Ocean with the Pacific and Bay of Bengal with South China Sea. And if you look at Brunei, it is the small country located over here on the island of Borneo. And this Muslim majority state is a constitutional monarchy sharing deep-rooted relations with India. In fact, historically as well, India has had civilizational links with Southeast Asia, particularly in Singapore and as well as in Brunei. If you go back to the Cholas, the Pallavas, these empires extended their influence all across Southeast Asia, and even today you find a strong Tamil community in Singapore that constitutes a significant component of the Indian diaspora in the country. So we have historical, civilizational, cultural links with these regions, and today we have economic, strategic and defense priorities as well. So as part of Act East policy, India has been prioritizing its relations with ASEAN Group, which is a regional group of Southeast Asian countries. As Prime Minister Modi once stated, ASEAN is the central pillar of our Act East policy. Under the Act East policy, we are focusing on Southeast and East Asia, and also the region beyond Southeast and East Asia, covering the wider Indo-Pacific region, extending to North and South Pacific as well. Now, if you look at the Look East policy that was launched by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao back in 1991, the prime intention of India was to diversify its foreign relations after the end of the Cold War. With the collapse of Soviet Union, India desperately needed new partners. And following the economic crisis of 1991, we also needed to find new markets, sources of investment and supply for essential resources to power the Indian economy after the introduction of LPG reforms. It was in this situation where India faced difficult external and internal choices that Look East policy was launched by the then Narasimha Rao government. So over 2 decades, Look East policy saw a lot of success in improving our economic, strategic, defense and cultural relations with Southeast and East Asia. But despite the success of Look East, there were few shortcomings. And to address that, the Modi government elevated the Look East policy to Act East policy in 2014. Under the Act East policy, India has been driving its Indo-Pacific vision to establish its economic and as well as military dominance in order to counter China, which has been a rising aggressive power across the Indo-Pacific. Under Act East policy, the Modi government has prioritized not just economic relations, but even defense and strategic relations and cultural ties. So this visit to Brunei and Singapore, which comes back to back, it adds momentum to the Act East policy and gives a major boost to our Indo-Pacific vision to step up our presence and influence and even to counter China across the Indo-Pacific. Now let's look at the specific initiatives that were brought out, the issues that were discussed and the agreements that were signed, so that we can understand the relevance of this visit. So Prime Minister Modi was visiting Brunei for the first time. In fact, this is the first time ever that an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Brunei on a bilateral visit. Back in 2013, then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had visited Brunei, but that was for the ASEAN summit as part of a multilateral gathering. But this is the first time that an Indian Prime Minister is visiting this small country, and this is a very important bilateral visit as it marks the 40th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. So during this visit, Prime Minister met with the Sultan of Brunei, who happens to be one of the richest leaders as well. And the Sultan of Brunei has already visited India at least on 4 different occasions and has played a pivotal role in strengthening ASEAN relations with India. So this return visit by Prime Minister Modi focused on key strategic, economic and cultural aspects of the relationship. Prime Minister Modi even took a pot shot at China while he was in Brunei. Now this is very significant because in South China Sea, China has picked up several maritime disputes and displayed military diplomatic aggression against these countries, including Brunei. So Prime Minister Modi stated that India's intention in Southeast Asia, in countries like Brunei, is to focus on development, not on expansionism. This was a clear pot shot at China, which has been displaying expansionist tendencies by claiming the entire exclusive economic zone in South China Sea to itself. China has even violated the established rules-based order. It has even broken the UN clause provisions or the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and disrupted freedom of navigation and overflight across the South China Sea and East China Sea. So this message from Prime Minister Modi is a strong message to China, and it shows that Brunei stands with India. Because South China Sea is very crucial and vital for India as well. Almost 55% of our trade passes through South China Sea. A lot of India's exports and imports, including our oil supplies, passes through South China Sea. So any conflict, any destabilization of this critical waterway will affect the Indian economy and the global economy. So India has always insisted that rules-based order has to be maintained. Indo-Pacific should be kept free and open, and freedom of navigation and overflight, which is a guaranteed right under UN clause, should be protected as part of international law. So China, which has posed a threat to these rights, has been countered by India in the Indo-Pacific, and Prime Minister Modi has clearly sent out a message by stating that India's intention is to develop the region, to assist Brunei in its development, not to focus on expansionism, which China has been doing. Now, this statement is very, very crucial given the location of Brunei, given that it has a standing dispute with China. If you look at the map given here, in South China Sea, there are multiple island groups which are a source of dispute with China and other countries. For example, the Parasil group of islands are disputed between China and Vietnam. And if you look at the Spratly group of islands, this is where Brunei becomes a party to the dispute with China and other countries, including Malaysia, Indonesia and Vietnam. And nearby, you have Philippines, where China and Philippines have a major dispute going on near Scarborough Shoal and the Second Thomas Shoal. In recent months, China has shown a lot of military aggression as well, where Chinese Navy and Coast Guard vessels have targeted the shipping vessels and fishing vessels of Philippines. So the growing aggression of China in the region does pose a threat to Brunei, and India's support in this regard marks a clear presence of India, and it shows India's stand on the issue, and in a way it puts the diplomatic pressure back on China against its expansionism and its aggressive behavior. So India and Brunei have together urged to protect freedom of navigation and overflight and ensure that the rules-based order is maintained as per the provisions of UN Convention on Law of the Sea. And both countries have focused on their defense relations as well, because under Act East policy, stepping up our defense relations has been a top priority. In fact, India-Brunei already exchange a lot of military visits. Every now and then, Indian naval ships and Coast Guard vessels have carried out port calls at strategic ports in Brunei, and we even have a lot of military training programs and joint exercises between the two countries. So two leaders have committed to step up the defense relations further, which firmly imprints India's military presence and hard power presence in Southeast Asia. Then if you look at space cooperation, Brunei is a key partner for India's ISRO. ISRO has set up a global network of tracking stations to track the launch sequence and also to receive data from the satellites and to maneuver the satellites in orbit. So apart from the tracking stations we have within India, there are few tracking stations set up by ISRO in other countries, like Mauritius, for example. So ISRO has a tracking station in Mauritius and as well as in Biak in Indonesia. And Brunei is also one country where there is a ISRO's tracking station that is a key part of our rocket launches and to receive data as well from the satellites in orbit. So India has thanked Brunei for hosting ISRO's telemetry tracking and ground station, and we have renewed the agreement to continue this space cooperation, which means ISRO's tracking station will continue to operate from Brunei, thus serving a significant objective for India. So this shows that our relations span multiple sectors, from defense to strategic relations to space cooperation. But the focus of the visit was also on economic relations, because Brunei has a very strong economic relationship with China and Brunei has a lot of dependency on China. China has expanded its Belt and Road Initiative into Brunei, and China is the biggest investor and the largest trading partner of Brunei. Their bilateral trade is already more than $2.6 billion, whereas if you compare this with India-Brunei trade relationship, it's hardly around $280 million. So the focus of India is to step up the economic relations, increase the trade volume and to leverage the capacities of both the countries. See, Brunei is a very small economy, but India can leverage the strength of Brunei. Brunei has certain key resources, from oil to natural gas, and there is a strong Indian community as well. Up to 15,000 Indians reside and work in the country. So leveraging the common strengths and ensuring that we focus on key areas of technology, finance, manufacturing is something that both countries are interested in. So few agreements have been signed in this regard to focus on agriculture, food supply chains, food security, which will help in driving this relationship further. And both leaders have also agreed to focus on LNG supplies. South China Sea is rich in hydrocarbon reserves and Brunei has a large exclusive economic zone which is blessed with oil and gas reserves. Earlier, India was looking at securing oil supplies from Brunei as well. But as of now, since Russia has been providing cheap oil supplies, this is no longer a priority for India. But we are focused on securing LNG supplies from Brunei, which India sees as a transition fuel as we transition towards cleaner, renewable forms of energy. So down the line, Brunei can become a reliable long-term supplier of liquefied natural gas that can power the Indian economy and secure India's energy security. Apart from this, many other areas of cooperation were discussed: healthcare, education, information communication technology, and more importantly, cultural and people-to-people relations. As I mentioned, there is a strong Indian community present in Brunei. A lot of Indians go to Brunei for work opportunities, and a lot of people from Brunei visit India as well, especially for medical tourism. So there is a lot of potential here to build people-to-people relations as well. So these were the significant outcomes of PM Modi's visit to Brunei that firmly establishes our economic, strategic, defense and economic and cultural presence in Southeast Asia region. But more importantly, the visit to Singapore, a 2-day visit to Singapore, it got more focus and attention given the fact that Singapore is a major trading partner for India. It's usually one of the top 10 trading partners, and as per latest data, Singapore happens to be the 8th largest trading partner of India. And as you know, Singapore is a major financial hub comparable with other financial hubs like New York, London, etc. And Singapore is a big source of investment, a big source of FDI into India. In fact, in the last fiscal, Singapore was the largest source of FDI into India. It even overtook United States and Mauritius. It's also a big source of institutional investment into our capital markets. So Singapore and India share very close financial relations and as well as cultural, defense and strategic relations. So Prime Minister Modi has met with the leaders of Singapore, and a few important agreements have been signed, and the relationship also has been elevated to the comprehensive strategic partnership level. PM Modi met with his counterpart Lawrence Wong, and 4 important MOUs were signed. And as we mark the 60th anniversary of our diplomatic relations next year in 2025, both countries have decided to elevate the relationship to the comprehensive strategic partnership level. Singapore has this relationship only with Australia. So that shows the priority that Singapore is giving to India on par with Australia. A comprehensive strategic partnership signifies a well diversified relationship, a relationship that focuses on multiple domains and sectors, not just defense and security, but even economic, cultural relations, education, healthcare, skill development, etc. So let's take a quick look at the agreements that were signed. Prime Minister Modi was accompanied by Foreign Minister Jaishankar as well and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. That again shows the priority of the visit, given that the top Indian leadership was present in both the countries. It signifies the focus on Act East policy and Indo-Pacific vision of India. So, 4 important agreements were signed, stretching across semiconductor manufacturing, digital technologies, education, healthcare and skill development. But the most important focus area was semiconductor manufacturing. Because see, right now, the world of semiconductor manufacturing and fabrication has acquired a geopolitical angle. You have the Fab 4 or the Chip 4 alliance, where you have the top 4 manufacturers, including Taiwan, Japan, South Korea and United States, that account for a significant share of semiconductor production and chip manufacturing. China is the other dominant player when it comes to semiconductor fabrication and manufacturing. So there is a clear geopolitical competition between these powers, with China on one side and the Fab 4 countries on the other side, as semiconductors have a critical value in the industry and as well as in the security defense domain. These are dual use technologies with civilian and military applications, vital across industries from electronics to manufacturing to defense and aerospace. So Singapore has created a niche for itself in the domain of semiconductor manufacturing and chip fabrication. It accounts for nearly 10% of the global semiconductor output with 5% of global wafer fabrication capacity. In fact, semiconductor industry in Singapore contributes 8% to Singapore's GDP. Even though it's a small city state, even though it has a big constraint on land and resources, it has created the perfect environment for semiconductor industries to thrive. Singapore has a very stable policy environment, creating a stable business condition with state-of-the-art infrastructure, improved connectivity from airports to seaport facilities to roads and rail network, which helps in attracting leading manufacturing companies, and Singapore has attracted the right human capital as well and created the right manpower and human resource. It is these factors which enable Singapore to become one of the leading producers of semiconductor chips, and that is something India would like to emulate. India has a vision to establish the country as a semiconductor manufacturing hub, and both the countries can complement each other and share the resources with each other. Because for Singapore, the biggest challenge is land and resources, where it is in shortage. For India, there is adequate availability of land, water, and more importantly, human capital. So we can attract the companies of Singapore and create a similar ecosystem and a supply chain which can be resilient to global supply chain shocks. So that's why Prime Minister Modi visited a major semiconductor manufacturing plant, and an agreement has been signed where Singapore will work with India to expand the semiconductor manufacturing units in India and to create a synergy between our semiconductor industries. The other focus area was digital technologies, including cybersecurity. India and Singapore are working on interconnecting and leveraging their DPI or digital public infrastructure. India has become a pioneer when it comes to the DPI infrastructure, be it the JAM Trinity that we have created with Jandan financial inclusion bank accounts and unique digital identity through Aadhaar and connecting them with mobile numbers. This has enabled improved public service delivery, from direct benefit transfer to direct credit of subsidies, pensions and social security, social welfare schemes directly into your bank accounts. Plus, India has created a robust digital payment system on the back of UPI or Unified Payments Interface, which has been extended into Singapore and interconnected with the Pay Now interface of Singapore. Last year, India-Singapore interconnected their payment systems to provide for real-time transfers between the two countries. So this can benefit traders, the students and workers who are residing and working in Singapore, and as well as the tourists. So the leveraging of digital technologies for public service delivery by relying on the DPI infrastructure, the interconnection of banking systems and digital payments. It pushes both countries to leverage the benefits of a cashless economy, speed up cross-border transfers, and thus benefit the economic relationship for both the countries. We also have a cybersecurity initiative. Singapore happens to be a leader in the field of cybersecurity, and given the challenges in the cybersecurity domain, it's only natural for India to work with Singapore. So India's CERT-In has already signed an agreement with the Cyber Emergency Response Team of Singapore, and both the leaders have agreed to take this cybersecurity relationship forward to strengthen our security cooperation. Then if you look at education and healthcare, both countries have signed an agreement to focus on training, skill development, focus on teacher training, and ensure that the human resource and manpower is empowered through exchange programs, internship programs, etc. If you look at healthcare, the focus has been on medical education and collaboration in pandemic management, in improving disease surveillance, and focusing on communicable and non-communicable diseases, so we can share the best practices with each other and step up cooperation in the field of healthcare as well, along with education. So these four agreements go a long way in cementing India's ties with Singapore. Coming to cultural relations, as I told you, there is a strong Indian community in Singapore. We have a historical civilizational link, and especially the Tamil community forms the strongest link between the two countries. If you ever visit Singapore, you will notice a strong South Indian Tamil influence and a general Indian influence. Today there are students, workers from every nook and corner of India residing and working and studying in Singapore. So to take the relationship forward in the cultural domain, India has announced the first Thiruvalluvar Cultural Center, which is going to open as a tribute to the legendary Tamil poet and philosopher, and it essentially symbolizes the reputation of Tamil language and literature and the Tamil connect between India and Singapore. So these were the major outcomes of this visit, and we cannot forget the close defense relations that we have with this small city-state. We have major military exercises with each other, including Simbex, which is a naval exercise, and Bold Kurukshetra, which is an army exercise. Recently, both the editions of Simbex and Bold Kurukshetra have been conducted. And Singapore relies on India for military training. Since it is a small city-state, it doesn't have enough land, water and airspace to train its army, navy and air force. So India creates that space by allowing Singapore Air Force to bring its F-16s, which is essentially sourced from the United States, so that Singapore's pilots can be trained in Indian military bases, in the military bases of the Indian Air Force. We throw open Bay of Bengal as well for Singapore's Navy to conduct drills and exercises, and thus we play a very important role in the training of Singapore's armed forces. So given that we have a common strategic vision, a common objective about the Indo-Pacific, it's very pivotal for India-Singapore to stay on the same page and take the relationship forward, especially given the rising aggression, dominance and influence of China. So that is why I believe that the back-to-back visit to Brunei and Singapore is a major step by the Modi government. It quite literally fires up the Act East policy and projects India's interests and influence across the Indo-Pacific, cementing our interests and as well as helping counter the rising Chinese presence and influence. So on this note, I would like to conclude the discussion. So do let me know what you think about this visit in the comments, and if you like the discussion, do press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.